speaker, Venkatesh Geriti. Over to you, Venkatesh.
Thank you so much, guys, for actually organizing this event, and also thank you for inviting me. And I wanted to apologize first for not able to actually come on video. I actually stuck on the middle of the road. I couldn't able to do the video call. So my colleague Ravi has actually told various issues involving Right to Information Act, largely focused on practical information, and also how Act actually works here in India and what kind of things an applicant should actually do. So I actually try to take you guys an historical necessity for these kind of facts, and how much important this act is and how it actually started. So as many of us know, liberal democracy or a participatory democracy has been the biggest innovation in governance since last 300 years. The first functional or constitutional democracy is actually United States. When they read their constitution, it became a very first a functional constitutional republic, which actually had certain rules how government actually works, and also how citizens, what kind of rights citizens have, how much balance there would be to actually improve a quality of power equation between citizen and the government. And and each every democracy or any liberal democracy should actually have a constitution that actually guarantees rights and freedoms of each and every citizens, and also constrain government from overwhelming power that can use against citizens. This is the one other thing that democracy do. Democracy actually is all about actually giving power back to people. So creating a channels that where they can actually access very access the information, and also where they can actually try to be stakeholders of this participatory democracy. And to do that, people require information. What kind of acts government going to do, and what kind of decision they're doing, and what kind of parameter they actually seeing in this decision making process. And for that, there has been a many laws for multiple centuries that restrain public to access government information. One of those acts actually Indian Secrets Act, which actually started in, if I'm not wrong, it's 1920s, where we actually inherited that from the British government, where government can actually do a lot of stuff, and they do not need to disclose it to the public. So this act has been protecting a lot of government employees, politicians, and also people who's in the power to actually disclose information about what kind of activities they're doing when they are in power, how they're functioning, and how much money they spend, and is it actually utilized very well or not. No one knows about the information. So to access these kind of information, accountability, transparency should be there. The accountability, transparency has been the two most important characteristics of any democracy. If there is no accountability, there is no transparency, then it become actually an authoritarian or totalitarian government that we have seen in Germany, right-wing authoritarianism such as Nazism, fascism. We can see it now in Belarus to some part of Brazil, and we can see certain Arabic nations where right-wing authoritarian has been actually influencing a lot. And we can see left-wing authoritarianism, such as socialist and communist countries, where they didn't need it to, where they can actually centralize the power. They don't need to disclose any kind of information that how they actually working on, especially countries like China, Russia, Cuba, North Korea. And to actually fight these kind of centralization of power, and also improving accountability and transparency, people have used an institution that can actually enable power balance between citizens and the states, such as Freedom of Information Acts is forefront of these institutions. And also, decentralization has been one of the tools that utilized to actually improve accountability and transparency, and also constitutional values that can guarantee each and every citizen of the political and civil rights. And as we're talking about our information acts, the one of the first freedom of information acts has been actually passed in Europe, in Sweden, I think 1748. One of the earliest countries to adopt Freedom of Information Act that actually become a role model for many developed and developing countries. I think more than 50 countries actually followed Sweden's path and actually passed these Freedom of Information Acts. And Right to Information Act is actually Indian act as a part of international upholding of the UN Declaration in 1948 on Freedom of Information Act is actually one of the fundamental human rights for each and every citizen of the world. And this act actually changes the power equation between citizen and state. How? Most of the times, for until I think 2000s, most of the time, state officials, people who has a power, rather than putting as a state officials, I would like to say, people who has a power, they actually acted as power agents, and they actually try to utilize that power as much as possible for their personal use, and also try to actually mismanage the governments. You might actually hear a culture of Mayor. It is actually inherited from the British government, where they actually say, I am actually ruler, you are actually my subordinate, you should actually follow whatever action I am actually saying. And whatever I say, you should actually follow it. But that actually changed. RTA has been a game changer for public to actually access the information and also constrain these overreaching power. That actually very helpful. And Indian Right to Information Act, or Freedom of Information Act, has been one of the most successful ones among the most of the countries that has these Freedom of Information Acts. We were able to actually expose huge number of scams that not only very big power abuses. Some of them you might already know, like other scam, and also 2G scam has been the biggest one, and also Commonwealth game scams where they misuse the funds to actually benefit their own, and also Indian Red Cross Society scam, and the many scams goes on. But is this the only thing that actually helped these scams to actually expose? Maybe not. But Right to Information Act has been a vital tool to actually expose these things. There has been people, there has been momentums, there has been youth that are actually trying to advocate for a corruption-free India. But RTA has given a strong power to these activists, these organizations, these groups that are actually trying to improve the governance. It become a very strong trump card for these activists to actually expose these power abuses. And through this one, it actually gives a strong access for each and every person to actually question authority, to go unchecked. And also it gives public a strong access to actually question elite class that actually created by these political crony business people. Most of the elite actually sees themselves as untouched. Common people cannot actually reach this elite class. But RTI actually proven again and again that no matter what kind of power you have, no matter what level of position you've been actually serving in the state, you can be questioned by a common man. This is a great thing. There has been similar incident, many of them. In 1700, Magna Carta was the first such an incident that actually questioned the power, where they actually questioned the power of the king himself, where they were able to question him and access and unable to reduce the power of king. And RTA has been shown such an exemplary influence that on a governance, improving accountability, promoting transparency, and also exposing corruption. But is RTA is the finest tool that we have, or is RTI is in the finest shape that we can actually put on? Maybe not. Some of it actually Ravi already told what kind of problems that applicants actually has been facing. One of such is when some activist actually trying to expose a corruption in a local level, and the people who is involved in that corruption try to actually uh, threaten his life, or trying to actually use their power to actually hurt the applicant. There has been a lot of problems that has been faced by these applicants, and also there has been other challenges that we seen in recent years. Central government recently trying to amend last year this Right to Information Act, where they actually trying to amend terms and conditions of the Central Information Commission, where these amendments actually received a mixed response, but large number of activists actually skeptical about these amendments. When they change the terms and conditions of the appointments and also salaries of this information commissions, it actually loses the independence of these information commission. Then they actually has to, depending on the state and central governments, where they might actually lose their independence and sovereignty over these officials. This is the one of the challenges that being discussed these days. And also recently there has been a case ongoing on in Supreme Court that actually Supreme Court, one of the hearings that was says the request has to be reasonable. Unfortunately, with all respect to Supreme Court, the fundamental purpose of this act is actually to give every citizens to actually access any information that you wanted to access of the government. This directive of providing this provide this directive of providing reason for why you actually asking this information might actually goes very fundamental nature of this act. That, but a very fortunate and very positive thing about this Supreme Court case is actually they haven't come to any conclusion. Then I hope they actually realize very central part of this Right to Information Act is to provide each and every citizen equal access to actually check or access and utilize these public data to actually provide to take it more effective decisions, especially when it comes to voting process. So I'm a very positive. I always been very optimistic, even though when we are actually starting up the anti-corruption movement, um, we were very optimistic one day. But most of the times, early months or early years, when we actually started working in the anti-corruption movement, most of the times the response from even from the youth has not been a very encouraging. I would say. Most of the times they see this as more political moment, then they don't need to participate in it. Then there is something happen because most every movement requires small wins in a shorter term. In a longer term, if I say we would able to actually get the Gen Lokpal bill in a longer term. That was our objective for when we actually started anti-corruption movement. But to sustain these youth movement, RTA has been a very vital for us because it gives us a short-term wins where we can actually expose local corruption, local level power abuses, where which is actually easy to do. But to passing a law in a parliament has been a very long journey. But this tool is actually give very strong strength to many youth organizations to keep momentum going. And end of the day, we will be able to, as with many organizations, with the help of many organizations, many people coming out when during 2011, 2012 anti-corruption movements, we would be able to successfully get the Jan Lokpal bill. But RTI has been a very vital role for many anti-corruption activists. One of the one of the biggest challenge I'm gonna discuss in the last it's about protection of the RTA applicants, which I was actually briefly touched. If we see most of the developed country doesn't have this gundagiri kind of culture most of the times, and also majority of developed countries actually disclose their information publicly and also voluntarily. Most of the times when you need actually a data from the public source, most of the time it's available. But in India, it's not happened. You have to request it, and you actually waited for it, and then you will get if you're lucky after one or two appeals. But along with this culture, there is also certain laws in these developed countries. It's not actually directly related to the Freedom of Information Acts, but these are the models that we might actually need to try. When if you're in a Europe or a US, you would see there is attorney client privilege. If some information you share with your lawyer, and your lawyer has a constitutional right to actually not to disclose any information that happened between you and your client. It's the same work with the doctor and patient privilege. And also there is a other thing called journalistic privileges, where journalist doesn't have to actually expose or mention source of the information that he was writing about. I think we should actually try something where the applicant of the Right to Information Act should be confidential, and also it should become a privilege. A privileged information which should not be shared without consent of the person who is actually involved in that privilege. So if you get, as an RTA applicant, if you get a privilege, then the concerning public information officer should not share any details of your RTA application with anyone outside the office. If he actually shares that one, it become a criminality. It become a violation of the law. That might actually help applicant. At the same time, we should also see a large number of these applications used for the actually political purposes. Most of the time, these well, these applications become a target for political reasons. That should also we need to actually look back and also try to have a discussions, these kind of debates, more with people or activist who is actually involving a ground, and I actually bring more solutions how we can actually improve right to information. And I no longer consider myself an activist, because I was an activist when I was in Lok Sabha, and also when I worked for anti-corruption activism. But since few years, I actually moved from activism to educational channels, where we try to actually educate a large number of people what is actually these political systems, how these works, and also what kind of powers government have, what kind of powers citizens have, what kind of balance that institutions and these kind of acts actually can actually bring to balance the power balance between these two people. So I think we should actually do more of these sessions or events that can involve more number of people who is actually involving in trying to utilize these acts as a powerful tool to counter the power of the government and also protect freedoms and rights of the each and every citizen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Venkatesh. This was very much inspiring. So,
Thank you.
yeah, so